What do we want to cover today first, John? Which topic we want to talk about?
So I'm thinking we should start with or actually, let's start with because they all kind of are election impact stories.
Okay.
But the least election impacty story, I think, is the Trump and Russia one. Because I think, well, you could argue, that it has some
It
impact on the
should. It
election.
should. It won't, but it should.
It,
Yeah.
it won't, but I think that it was surprising to me because when I saw this story, and we're gonna get to what exactly it is, I was like, oh, whoop de doo, much ado about nothing, and I still think that, but there's so much meat to this story. It is quite funny, and I want to talk about it. So Trump is once again in potential legal trouble by violating what is known as the Logan Act. Now, will this actually put him in legal trouble? No. The Logan Act was made in the 1700s, and there has never been a conviction on the Logan Act. There's ever only been two prosecutions. Both were in the 1800s. So this is one of those laws that are on the books, which politicians will sometimes throw around, and it sounds all official and scary, but it's just a complete nothing burger. It's like one of those laws where it's illegal to be in a bathtub with an alligator in the state of like one of those weird laws that are on the books that's never actually come into play. But there's a lot of fun to this story. So what happened? So the Logan Act is a law that says that a U.S. citizen cannot negotiate with a foreign leader against the current U.S. policy. And Donald Trump clearly has talked with foreign leaders as a U.S. citizen, not in his capacity as president. And this one specifically is talking about Vladimir Putin, which there was allegations in a new book called War from Bob Woodward, which detailed conversations that Trump had with Vladimir Putin, some of them including sending him COVID tests during the height of the pandemic when Americans couldn't get their hands on COVID tests. So that is the intro to this story. And there's a couple other fun details, but I talked and introduced it a little while. TJ, what were your thoughts when you first heard about these allegations?
So yeah, I first heard about him yesterday, the day before, something like that. Pretty recently, when I heard that Trump had apparently sent COVID tests to Putin, and since Republicans love Vladimir Putin now, I wonder if they like him less now that he believes COVID is real. Because how are they gonna they got to keep trying to square this circle of COVID is real, COVID is fake. It's also a bioweapon. It was also engineered to not hurt Chinese or Jewish people, whatever nonsense they believe. But what jumped out to me when I was reading about this, and you had mentioned it, was Bob Woodward wrote another book. How many? I'd like to take a poll of everyone I know, how many books by Bob Woodward they have read. I haven't cracked open one, not one, but the guy must have written a dozen books by now. I feel like he does it every couple of years. He wrote another one about the Trump White House. It was all the recordings and stuff that he had from President Trump, and he just never stopped.
2022. That was
That
2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah. I was like, who was actually reading this shit? But with the thing with him and Putin, I mean, yeah, of course, because I was reading it, and it said in the article that I was looking at that a lot of times people were trading or handing out COVID tests to foreign dignitaries and foreign leaders because there were a lot of limited supplies. And I said, you know what? On the surface, that actually seems I understand that. I get if I'm the president of a nation and I'm talking to another president and both our nations are in short supply, but he has zero. Yeah, I can hook him up with one, but it's Vladimir Putin. It's Vladimir Putin. The guy that Trump pretends that he has nothing to do with, that they're not buddy and everything. Honestly, I have a hard time actually figuring out what their relationship is. I don't really know. I really can't tell you because I don't think Trump is all on board with everything Putin does, but he does seem very friendly to him. But I couldn't exactly tell you everything about what's going on there. But
I can explain this relationship.
Oh, let's go.
Pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
You have someone who is a former Soviet spy
Mm-hmm.
who's trained in the arts of espionage and manipulation. who has been granted access to the most easily manipulated world leader of all time. And that is the relationship.
Yeah.
Plays him like a fiddle. That's it. Like and it's not that hard.
Yeah. Could you imagine how easy it would be? Oh, there was what's the guy's name? He's a comedian named Andrew something. He's got weird hair and the little
Oh,
mustache.
he just went on his podcast.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember his last name. But he but there was the video you're talking about where Trump went on the podcast and everything. The entire time they're laughing. Andrew Schultz. Thanks. They're laughing at Donald Trump the entire time. There was this really funny moment where he talks about, I went on to Face the Nation, and he goes, the show, it's called Face the Nation. They spent millions of dollars on the name Face the Nation. I say deface the nation. And Andrew Schultz was like, oh, I didn't know. Okay, I was wondering why you were saying that. They were just mocking him the whole time, but they were being really chummy and really complimentary to him, in a disingenuous way, but Trump was too dumb to catch it. I was like, oh man, Trump would be so easy. He'd be so easy to just string along anytime he wanted. So yeah, that's a good, Putin's definitely doing that.
And the thing is, there aren't enough, people around Trump aren't going to tell him that he was being made fun of the whole time. They're just going to be like, yeah, no,
they loved you.
They loved you, bro. It is really funny to see how easily manipulated he is. And this is going to be a recurring theme throughout our stories today, but it is incredible to see the extent to which the fascist morality of what advances the interests of my in-group is morally correct and what doesn't is morally wrong, just permeates the entire Trump relationship with him.
Yes.
Because Republicans literally want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to call Russia an enemy because there's nothing they love more than rallying against an enemy. But also they see Putin as a strong man, and that's a good thing because Trump says it is. And they do both at this. Depending on what the news cycle is, they are either for or against Russia. They flip flop all the fucking time. There is no consistency to the Republican position on Russia, and it is very weird.
Man, what do Republicans even believe anymore? This is what's so frustrating, that it wasn't that long ago, just a few years ago, that you could pinpoint this list of what the Republicans stood for and what they wanted, but you can't do that anymore. You can't. And this is such a good example you talked about with their reverse patriotism when it comes to places like Russia and everything. And you remember when Brittany Griner was in jail in Russia because she brought a little bit of marijuana into the country, and so they locked her up. Now, ever since, I don't know, the last 5-6 years or so, every Republican I know is like, oh yeah, marijuana, it should be legal. Once again, which would have never happened 15, 20 years ago. Now they're all on board with it mysteriously. And then they're like, oh, she broke the rules. She did the crime. She has to do the time. And we had, there was an exchange for some Russian arms dealer that we traded out for Brittany Griner. And everyone is saying how based the arms dealer was, and that because the arms dealer came out and made a statement about how wokeness is bad and how I can't believe that in the United States, that North Korean girl that's over here who always talks about
she was on Rogan, she's that classic meme. Yep.
Yeah. In North Korea, they throw you in a tub full of cockroaches if you don't pay your rent on time and stuff like that. So he became their person for the United States. Says, oh, the United States, you can't tell the men from women at all. The wokeness is terrible. There was this whole speech he made, and all the people were like, I can't believe we got rid of this guy and got Brittany Griner instead. It's they don't even have loyalty. Well, certain Americans don't get loyalty. We all know. Gay, black, lesbians certainly aren't going to get it. So they just, I don't know. It's just and the Putin thing, it is kind of crazy because that's why it's actually weird to me, because they don't think COVID was real. So Putin getting the test, who cares? They're not going to give a shit about it either way.
It's one of those things where there are certain facets of leftist ideology that I feel are very confirmation biasy, survivorship biasy, that we kind of just say as truisms that aren't necessarily tested. And one of them is how fascists ideologically cling together. and liberals then support them as opposed to joining with leftists. And there are very many examples of that. But I also just feel like it's not always true. But like, there's so many times like this, like for whatever reason, you can't explain it any other way why Republicans love anyone who hates woke people. They don't give a shit how much of an enemy Russia is to them. If the fucking Russian arms dealer of death says, "Oh well, those woke people, fuck them," well, that Russian arms dealer of death, he's on our side now. And it's like there's zero ideological consistency except for what advances my in-group is morally correct. And if you are an enemy of my enemy, you are my friend until you are my enemy. And then you are my enemy again. Like that's it. And that's why that classic poem, like at first they came for whoever and then they came for me. Like, yeah, that's how it fucking works. They get a broad tent by getting you to hate a certain group of people. People who are woke, immigrants, whatever the fuck it is, you're going to hate them. And you're going to think you're in their fucking tent. But as soon as you are outside the in-group, well, you're the next fucking immigrant. And that's why you see over and over again, people like Trump associate themselves with people like Putin, with people like Kim Jong-un, like with people like fucking Bibi Netanyahu, because they are attracted to power for power's sake. Because that's the thing that is ultimately the highest moral value, is having the power to advance the interests of your in-group. And if you can do that, then you are good. And if you can't do that, then you are bad. And that explains everything.
Yeah.
Like if you're like, yeah, there's nothing I can point at. That's it. That's the one thing. That's the one through line through all of the Republican ideology. It is that. It is not a policy. It is, does this advance the interests of my in-group? And what your in-group is a fucking Rorschach test.
Yeah. It's like why QAnon worked. Because if you ask, like, what is QAnon, very difficult to answer that question. It's kind of complex because it's this mishmash of 1,000 different conspiracies all over the place that kind of bond them together with, hatred of whatever marginalized group they've chosen and a deep suspicion for any power structure. Cynicism towards any power structure. A good example of what you were talking about, how they will take someone who they formally declared to be an enemy and then immediately rope them in the second they say something bad about a group they hate. Caitlyn Jenner. If you guys remember when Bruce Jenner first became Caitlyn Jenner, and there was this, I forget what the magazine was, like Vogue magazine or something like that, and it came out with Caitlyn Jenner on the cover. It said, "Call me Caitlyn," and had her as, the woman of the year. I swear to God, it must have been 18 months, 2 years, where they wouldn't shut the fuck up about this. They said, "Can you believe they made a man woman of the year?" As if they could name the previous woman of the year, for before, or like these titles, like sexiest man alive, woman of the year and shit. They don't mean anything. They're just there to sell copies of the magazine. But you ask a Republican, the fact that Caitlyn Jenner was named Woman of the Year was an offense to their sensibilities on the highest possible level. And now, though, the second Caitlyn Jenner came out and said, "Yeah, I think trans women in sports is a bad idea," they love her. They love her. And then she talks more. I remember her being on Fox News talking about there was a tax that was going to be put in place specifically for private jets. And Caitlyn Jenner was on there saying, "This is a horrible idea. This is going to wreck the economy." Like, "Oh, thank you, Caitlyn. We really appreciate this." Yeah, because, she says the right things and they're on board with her now. Although they hate her, it doesn't matter. As long as she says the right things, they're going to do it.
And that's like the appeal to there's always been that appeal, especially to members of minority groups that are targeted by far right-wing movements. I don't know what the right word is. Like Uncle Tomming is the best way I can think of right now to describe it. Of just like, yeah, there's a lot of fucking money for a Candace Owens, a black woman, to go and spew this Nazi rhetoric. And you're like, oh well, if she's a black woman, then how can she actually be a Nazi? It's because there's a lot of money. Eventually, they'll come for her. Mm-hmm. But her bet is just that she'll be safe by the time they do. And sometimes it works out that way, right? But other times it doesn't. In fact, most times it doesn't. And it really sucks that we never learned this lesson, DJ. It's incredible how this same exact pattern happens time and time and time again. But we don't actually, and I think this is the problem that I've said before. We don't teach the pattern; we just teach the result. We just teach. Oh yeah, the Jews died by the millions.
Oh,
Nothing really happened before that to lead to that. It's just bad people killed the Jews. That's it. We killed the bad people. We're good now. Bad people enslaved black people and instituted Jim Crow laws. But we don't have slavery or Jim Crow laws anymore, so we're all good now. Absolutely nothing happened before that to lead to those circumstances. Like, we don't teach the causes, we just teach the effects. And so every time the causes happen, people just think the effects can't happen because they already happened in the past. And we learned our lesson, but we didn't because we don't recognize the causes.
Yeah. I'll address that real quick, but you mentioned Candace Owens. There's a lot of money in tokenizing for the right wing. That's
tokenization. That's what I was probably looking for.
Yeah, if you're a part of a marginalized group and you want to spew hatred toward your group, then let's go. They'll take you in. And you mentioned how there's a lot of money in being a black Nazi, and I was thinking, that's true. However, it does make you wonder about these people who are black Nazis for free. Like, what is wrong with you? You don't even get anything out of this, right? Like, you just have so much fucking hatred that you're just in barbershops spreading, Hotep white supremacy nonsense. It's like, why, man? You don't have to do this. You can just be a normal fucking person. Like Rupert Murdoch's not going to call you and ask you to come on your show. And the thing with how we teach the problem, like the end result, and not the beginning, that's just how we teach history, unfortunately. And it's not even how we teach history. It's just how we view the world. And like a great example of this we always talk about is what's going on in Israel right now. Very similar to what happened to us here in the United States when, it's not the exact thing, but you guys know what I'm saying, where there is an overreaction to an excuse from an action to, just devastate people on a disproportionate scale. And we all cheered and clapped for it. It's like, no, and no one learned. Not no one, but a lot of people didn't learn from it. And you can see this with Republicans in not addressing the core issue. Because like you mentioned that, so back in the 1930s, the bad people did this to Jewish people in Germany, but then we killed all the bad people. And, the slavery thing happened and we fought a war, we beat them with the army and we got rid of slavery without talking about the core. And like with Germany, they just pretend that the anti-Semitism popped up out of nowhere in 1930, that, Adolf Hitler was the only person who had this idea. It's like, oh, yeah, no, it was pervasive. It was everywhere in Europe at the time. And the Republicans kind of look at this they do this with crime or riots. They talk about how, hey, look, we got all this crime going on in this neighborhood. We have riots taking place. So here's what we'll do. Good people don't commit crimes. Bad people do commit crime. We're going to lock up all the bad people and all the crime will stop. And it never works. It never works because that's not the problem. The problem isn't people who are just born evil. There's always socioeconomic circumstances that lead to that, and they refuse to address it. I just don't know how more people don't see it. If you think about it for 10 seconds, you can get to the conclusion pretty quickly, but we just don't.
I think that it's very helpful to be detached in some way from the cycle of suffering. Like, I don't want to speak for you, TJ, but for myself personally, I've lived a pretty fortuitous life. I had, certainly I'm at some level a victim of capitalism, and I've been exploited as a member of the working class, yada, yada, yada. But all in all, I grew up in an upper middle class white suburb of Philadelphia. Like, my life could be a lot worse, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not a victim of the machine. That being said, I'm able to kind of just look at it from the outside and go, oh yeah, all of this is so obvious. But someone who's actively getting fucking trampled isn't going to look at it like that. They're going to see a problem, and they're going to want to get out from under it no matter how they can. And I think a lot of times what happens is that people who are downtrodden are often the first to turn to these far-right ideologies like fascism. Like, Hitler rose in Germany because, as a consequence of extreme austerity, isn't even the right word. It was like economically punitive measures taken on Germany as punishment for World War I, created absolutely a downtrodden population who were looking for anyone to step on themselves. Because being able to step on someone else while you're being stepped on makes you feel better about being stepped on. If you are at a lower level of a hierarchical system, you are more likely to support that system as long as there are people below you that you can be like, at least I'm better than them. And I feel like that is the trap that so many people fall into. On all this happens on both sides of the aisle, by the way. Like I had someone today like arguing, oh well, we should stop funding the Iron Dome because the people in Israel deserve to die. I'm like, no, fuck, that's the same goddamn argument, just flipped on its head. And I get it. I get it, but it's just as wrong. Like, it's just as wrong as the argument the other side makes. Which is why we're consistent. Which is why, TJ, we've said this before, I respect the fucking white supremacists more than I do the standard.
I do. At
least they're fucking consistent.
I do. Mm-hmm.
Like they have logical consistency. It's fucking horrific, but at least they aren't like trying to fool themselves.
Yeah, or you. That's really because that's what. Because conservatives, I don't know. It's gotten to the point now that I don't want anything to do with most conservatives, honestly, because if you don't need to be like deep in the trenches of political online activity to hear what other conservatives say and to hear what the thought leaders say, to hear what the politicians say, to see what they said in the past and what they support. It's like, oh, these guys are white supremacists. They come like just short of saying the actual term most of the time. A lot of them do say the actual term. And it's like, okay, if I've noticed this, you've definitely noticed this. You've definitely noticed this if you've been there. You've been hanging out in a group of nothing but Republicans and heard what they've said. You've seen the organizations they sign up with, the websites they follow. It's just, yeah, you guys know what's going on. But oh shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. I should have wrote it down. Damn, geez. I had something I was going with. What were you talking about just now? The
system of oppression, the cycle of oppression, the hierarchical worldview.
That's right. Oh shit. The hierarchical oppression, the systems that you'll see this a lot in, because you see, you're right. It affects pretty much everybody. And I'll speak with for black people first, or about black people first, is that a lot of times you'll see black people and they'll say that, well, you know, the solution is black excellence or black capitalism. No, it's not. Black capital. Look, white. Capitalism hasn't fixed the problem for white people, okay? It certainly isn't going to fix ours, okay? Well, it's not going to happen. So people delude themselves into thinking, all right, it's kind of like what Jordan Peterson does, or Andrew Tate, or the red pill guys, or honestly, hell, any conservative, speaker or commentator, is they'll say, they get the first part right. Congratulations. The first part is the system is stacked against you. The rich and the powerful and elite, they don't have your best interest at heart. They are going to screw you over the first possible chance they have. That is true. And the system is not in your favor. What you need to do is to make sure the system works better in your favor. And fuck everybody else. That's what it is. Like, that's their solution, that they need to take this unfair system and exploit it to their advantage at the expense of their fellow human beings. Which, yeah, congrats. That's sociopathic, but that doesn't actually solve the problem for anybody, honestly. What's that noise?
And to tie it back all the way to Russia and Putin and Donald Trump, it is just such a clear example of exactly what you're describing, where they know at some level, they must see Donald Trump being buddy-buddy with Vladimir Putin, sending him COVID tests. Like, that should on every level piss them off. Every single level of Republican ideology, Donald Trump sending Vladimir Putin COVID tests during the height of the pandemic, when he was implementing lockdowns and like we couldn't get these tests out to Americans, sending them off to a bad leader of a bad country, an outgroup country. But it doesn't matter, because it wouldn't advance the interests of their group, their level of the hierarchy. It wouldn't help them to either shoot down or rise up themselves, and so they just ignore it. And just like they ignore all of the warning signs. And, at a certain level, ignorance must be bliss, DJ. Until that comes and bites you in the face, denial is one hell of a fucking drug.
Yeah, I do think about that sometimes. That I am kind of jealous of them. Like, you ever see like a golden retriever and it's just having the time of its life? You're like, it doesn't know anything about Gaza or anything. That's kind of like Republicans are. I see them like they're just having so much fun. It's like, yeah, being an idiot is pretty cathartic. It would make your life a lot better. And even just dismissing reality. When you just mentioned the COVID lockdowns and everything, whenever you talk to people, oh, not this doesn't happen to people I talk to, but you'll hear people saying, "Yeah, Biden and Harris with the lockdowns." I said the lockdown started in 2020. Like that's when the lock. In fact, that's when they were at their most stringent at the middle and end of 2020. It kind of tapered off from there. Like by late 2021, most of them had. I mean, we weren't even locked down anymore by that point. We were locked down for what? A month, maybe in some places, maybe, and not really. If you talk to people who are overseas, I had another podcast I was on, and the person I was speaking with, she was in Italy during 2020. They were literally locked down. They couldn't leave their city. I knew people in Australia, like there were checkpoints in the road to make sure you go. We had it pretty easy in terms of lockdowns, and most of them were under Trump. They don't blame him. They don't blame him at all. They think Anthony Fauci was very clearly manipulating data and doing gain of functions tests to try to kill people. Trump never fired him, and they don't give him any shit for this. It's just I don't know. I wish I could find out like how he did this weird cult mind control on millions of people, because it's just sad to see.
All right, guys, you made it to the end of the video. Once again, go you. You are our favorite viewer, especially if you've liked and subscribed. It's just me and TJ here this week. We'll have a guest here again next week, and they will tell you where to find them. But this week, TJ, let's just close it out.
Let's just do it. You know what? I really appreciate those of you, the conservatives who hate watch. Your comments are very funny to me. Very funny. Not insightful, not clever, not thoughtful, not informative anyway, but they do make me laugh. So keep up the great work, folks. We really appreciate it.